Sheriff was ordered to sell the Apache into slavery, but he chose to save her, not sell her. The sun rose slowly over the small town, painting the dusty streets in shades of gold and orange. Sheriff Thomas Mitchell stood outside his modest office, squinting at the horizon. The morning air was still, but an uneasy tension hung over the town, heavier than the heat that would soon arrive. Thomas had served as the sheriff for nearly 10 years. He was known for being fair and firm, respected by the townspeople for his honesty and sense of justice. Yet this morning, his heart was heavy, weighed down by a command that made every fiber of his being tremble. The sheriff had received a letter from the authorities late the previous evening. It was written in cold, official language, a paper that seemed almost alive in its cruelty. The order was simple: capture a young Apache woman who had been found near the outskirts of the settlement and sell her into slavery. Thomas read the words again and again, hoping they might change, hoping that somewhere in the fine print there was a mistake, a mercy he could cling to. But the words remained the same, unyielding and harsh. He paced back and forth in his small office. His boots scuffed the wooden floor, leaving dark marks that mirrored the turmoil in his mind. Thomas had always believed in the law, but he also believed in humanity. The law was meant to protect people, not destroy them. Yet here he was, being asked to do something that felt like a betrayal of everything he had stood for. He thought of the young woman, an Apache girl, probably no older than 20. The authorities had written nothing about her personality, her story, or her family. To them, she was not a person, just a commodity, something to be bought and sold. But Thomas knew that every person had a story, a past full of hopes, fears, and dreams. He could not shake the thought that the girl, like anyone else, deserved dignity and respect. The sheriff's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of horses approaching. He looked up and saw 2 deputies riding slowly down the street. Their faces were serious, their eyes alert. They knew something was troubling him. Deputy Lane, a young man with eager eyes, dismounted first. "Sheriff, are you all right?" Lane asked, concern in his voice. "You look like you haven't slept a wink all night." Thomas shook his head slowly. "It's this order," he said quietly, showing Lane the paper he had received. "They want me to sell a human being into slavery, a young Apache woman." Lane's eyes widened and he stepped back. That's terrible. What are you going to do?" Thomas sighed. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "I have my duty as sheriff, but I also have my conscience. Something doesn't sit right with me about this. It never should." The town itself seemed to hold its breath that morning, as if sensing the storm that was quietly forming. The market was just beginning to wake. Merchants lifted shutters and swept the dust from their wooden stalls. Children ran through the streets, laughing and chasing each other, unaware of the weight of the decisions being made by those who protected them. Thomas walked outside, letting the warm morning sun fall on his face. He needed clarity, a way to understand what was right. He thought of his father, a man of strong morals who had taught him that courage was not just about facing danger, but about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult. "A man who chooses the wrong path for the sake of obedience," his father had once said, "is no better than a coward hiding behind orders." Those words echoed in Thomas's mind like a bell, clear and insistent. He knew that if he refused the order, there would be consequences. The authorities were strict and the law was their weapon. Disobedience could cost him his career, his reputation, even his freedom. But the thought of handing the girl over, watching her life be sold as if she were an object, made his stomach churn. He could not do it. The hours passed slowly. Thomas spoke with townspeople in hushed tones, testing their reactions without revealing the full truth. Some nodded in silent agreement, sharing his discomfort. Others avoided his gaze, afraid to voice their thoughts. He realized that the town itself was trapped in fear, bound by rules that did not always reflect justice or morality. Yet among those quiet nods, Thomas found a small spark of hope. He was not completely alone in his desire to do what was right. As the sun climbed higher, Thomas returned to his office and began to make plans. He could not ignore the order entirely. He had to find a way to protect the girl while avoiding immediate suspicion. His mind raced through possibilities. Could he delay the delivery? Could he find a way to hide her temporarily? Each option carried risks, but every hour of hesitation seemed better than the certainty of cruelty. Late that afternoon, Thomas decided to ride out toward the outskirts of the town, where the Apache girl was believed to be staying. He mounted his horse, the leather creaking beneath him, and felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. The journey was quiet, the only sounds the soft clop of hooves on the dirt road and the occasional cry of a bird overhead. His thoughts were with the young woman, imagining her fear, her confusion, and the injustice she faced. When he reached the edge of the settlement, Thomas dismounted and looked out over the open land. It was harsh and unforgiving, but beautiful in its own way. The Apache people had lived in these lands for generations, knowing every rock, every tree, every stream. The girl was part of that world, and yet here she was, in danger from forces she could not control. Thomas felt a surge of determination. He would not allow her to be treated as property. Hours passed as he scouted the area cautiously. He had to be careful. The authorities could be watching, and any wrong move could ruin everything. He thought about the future, about the life the girl might have if she were free, and about the example he could set for the town. If he could act with courage and compassion, maybe others would follow. As evening approached, Thomas finally saw her. She was standing near a small stream, the sunlight catching her dark hair and strong, proud features. She looked like she belonged to the land itself, a spirit of resilience and dignity. When their eyes met, Thomas felt a connection, a silent understanding that he could not ignore. She was not just a person to be sold. She was a human being with a right to live freely, a person whose life mattered. The sheriff's heart ached, but he also felt a quiet strength growing within him. He knew the road ahead would be dangerous, filled with uncertainty and risk. But he also knew that doing what was right often required courage, especially when the law demanded otherwise. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned a brilliant shade of orange, Thomas made a silent vow. He would protect her, no matter the cost. He would stand against injustice, even if it meant standing alone. The town slept unaware of the choice their sheriff had quietly made, a choice that would change the lives of two people forever. Thomas sat by the stream, watching the stars begin to appear, and felt a sense of purpose. The law had its rules, but humanity had its own measure. And in that quiet moment, the sheriff knew that he had chosen the path of honor, of courage, and of compassion. As darkness fell, Thomas began planning the next steps. He would need allies, a careful strategy, and a steadfast heart. But one thing was certain. He would not allow the Apache woman to be sold into slavery, not while he had the power to protect her, not while he still had the courage to act. And so, the first chapter of their story ended, not with despair, but with the promise of hope, the first spark of rebellion against cruelty, and the unwavering decision of a man who chose to do what was right. Sheriff Thomas Mitchell spent the night thinking about the Apache woman he had seen by the stream. Her image stayed in his mind, the way she stood tall and strong despite the danger surrounding her, the quiet dignity in her eyes, and the resilience that seemed to shine even in fear. Thomas knew that meeting her properly would not be easy. Trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. And yet, he also knew that the sooner he spoke to her, the better the chance he had to protect her from the cruelty of the authorities. The next morning, Thomas prepared for the meeting with careful thought. He packed a small satchel with supplies, bread, water, and blankets, simple things that could show her he meant no harm. As he mounted his horse and rode quietly toward the outskirts, he reminded himself to be patient. Any wrong move could frighten her and destroy the fragile opportunity to gain her trust. When he arrived at the place near the stream where he had seen her, the Apache woman was already awake, sitting on a flat rock with her knees drawn close to her chest. Her dark eyes, alert and cautious, followed every movement of Thomas as he approached. She did not speak at first, and he did not rush her. He dismounted carefully, letting his horse graze nearby, and held out the small satchel. "I mean no harm," Thomas said gently. "I just want to help you." The woman's eyes narrowed. She did not step forward, but she did not run either. There was a cautious intelligence in her gaze, a sense that she had learned to survive through careful observation. Thomas noticed the way she studied him, measuring his movements, searching for any sign of deceit. He knew it would take time for her to believe that he truly wanted to help. "I have food," Thomas continued softly, "and water. You must be tired and hungry." She glanced at the satchel, then back at him. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Why should I trust you? Everyone I have met wants to control me, to take my life from me." Thomas nodded, understanding her fear. "I cannot make you trust me," he said. "But I can promise that I will not hurt you. I want to protect you from those who would do you harm." For a long moment, she did not respond. Then slowly, she reached out and took the bread and water from the satchel. She did not smile, but her eyes softened slightly, a small sign that she was willing to listen. Thomas realized that trust could begin with even the smallest gestures, providing comfort, offering food, and showing patience. They sat together in silence for a while, the sound of the stream flowing beside them. Thomas watched her closely, noticing the subtle tension in her body, the way she flinched at sudden movements. He understood that her life had been filled with fear and uncertainty, and that she had learned to protect herself at every turn. It made him respect her even more. She was not just a victim, she was a survivor. After a time, he asked gently, "Can you tell me about yourself? About your family, your life before all of this?" She hesitated. For a moment it seemed as if she might not answer. But then, as if deciding that it was safe to share a part of her story, she spoke in a quiet, measured voice. "I am from the Apache tribe. My family, my people live far from here in the mountains. We hunt, we gather, we live with the land. My father taught me to respect nature, to respect life. My mother taught me to be strong, to never give up, no matter what comes." Thomas listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. She was not just a person facing danger. She was a human being with roots, memories, and a culture that had shaped her. He could see why the authorities wanted to erase her identity, why they wanted to treat her as property rather than a person. It made him even more determined to protect her. "You have endured much already," he said softly, "and now you face a new danger, one you did not create. But I will help you. You do not have to face it alone." She looked at him, searching his face for any hint of falsehood. Slowly, a flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. She did not smile, but she seemed to consider that perhaps not all people were cruel. Perhaps, in a world filled with injustice, there were still those who would act with kindness and courage. Thomas knew the journey ahead would be difficult. He could not simply take her into town without drawing attention. The authorities were watching closely, and the townspeople, while mostly supportive of justice, would not easily understand why he might disobey a direct order. He had to be careful, but he also had to act before it was too late. Over the next few days, Thomas and the Apache woman spent time together in the quiet of the outskirts. He brought her supplies, spoke to her about the world beyond the mountains, and listened as she shared stories of her tribe, her family, and her life in the wilderness. She told him about the hunts, the traditions, and the lessons her parents had taught her. With each story, Thomas felt a deeper connection forming. He began to see her not as someone he needed to save, but as a person whose courage and wisdom inspired him. The Apache woman, in turn, began to see Thomas as more than just a sheriff. She saw his honesty, his determination, and his willingness to stand against cruelty. She observed the careful way he treated her, never raising his voice, never forcing her to act against her will. Slowly, trust began to grow, fragile but real. She realized that perhaps she had found an ally, someone who could help her navigate the dangers that threatened her life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of red and purple, Thomas and the woman sat by the stream. The air was cool, and the sound of flowing water was soothing. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I have lost so much. My family, my home, everything I knew, and now I fear that I will lose my freedom as well." Thomas placed a hand gently on his satchel, as if to show her that hope still existed. "You will not lose it," he said firmly. "I will make sure of that. There is a way to protect you, to keep you safe. It will be difficult, but I will not fail you." The woman studied him, her eyes searching for any sign of weakness. Finally, she nodded, a small but meaningful gesture. It was the first true sign of trust. Thomas felt a sense of relief, but he knew that their journey was only beginning. The world outside was dangerous, and every decision they made from this point forward could change the course of their lives forever. Over the following days, Thomas began to make careful plans. He observed the town from a distance, noting the routines of the authorities and the patrols that might notice an Apache woman in hiding. He spoke quietly with a few trusted townspeople, gauging their reactions and hoping to find allies who could help if the situation became dire. Every step had to be precise, every movement deliberate. One mistake could undo all the progress they had made. Meanwhile, the Apache woman practiced patience and caution. She learned to trust Thomas incrementally, testing his promises with questions and actions. She would not reveal all her thoughts or fears, but small gestures, accepting food, following him cautiously, speaking quietly of her past, showed that trust was forming. Both of them knew that their bond would be crucial in the days to come. By the end of the week, Thomas felt a growing determination. He could see the resilience in her eyes, the strength that would help her survive whatever dangers lay ahead. He knew that protecting her would require courage, wisdom, and careful planning. But he also knew that he could not ignore the injustice she faced. The law demanded one thing, but his heart demanded another, and he had already chosen to follow the path of righteousness, no matter the risk. As night fell and the stars appeared overhead, Thomas and the Apache woman sat by the stream once more. Silence stretched between them, comfortable and reflective. In that quiet, Thomas felt a sense of resolve. He had seen her courage, and it inspired him to act with even greater determination. He would protect her, no matter the cost. And she, in turn, had begun to believe that freedom and safety were possible, even in a world filled with danger. The bond they had formed in those few days was fragile but powerful, a silent promise of trust, protection, and courage. The sheriff knew that the days ahead would test both of them, but he also knew that together, they had a chance to overcome the injustice that threatened her life. And for the first time in a long while, both of them allowed themselves to hope. Days passed, and the tension in Sheriff Thomas Mitchell's heart grew heavier. The order to sell the Apache woman into slavery still weighed over him like a dark cloud. Each morning, as he watched the townspeople go about their daily routines, he felt the sharp contrast between the calm of ordinary life and the storm of injustice he faced. Every second that the woman remained in danger made his decision more urgent, yet the risks of defying the authorities seemed to grow by the hour. The sheriff knew that he could not protect her forever in the open. They had created a small, hidden camp near the stream, but it was not safe for long. Patrols moved regularly, and news of the young Apache woman's presence might soon reach the ears of those who would harm her. Thomas spent his days planning, thinking through every possible scenario. He consulted maps, watched the movements of the town guards, and calculated how he might transport her if the time came. Every plan carried risks, yet doing nothing was not an option. As he worked, The Apache woman remained cautious but attentive. She observed the sheriff, noticing the way he studied every detail, the seriousness in his eyes, and the determination that seemed to radiate from him. Slowly she began to trust his judgment, though she never let her guard down completely. She had learned from life's harsh lessons that safety was fragile and fleeting. Yet there was something about Thomas, his quiet strength and honesty, that inspired hope. One afternoon, while Thomas was scouting the area for possible dangers, he overheard two townsmen talking near the market. Their voices were low but urgent. "The sheriff's hiding someone," one said. "I heard it from old Jenkins. The authorities will expect him to follow the orders, but I don't think he will." "Do you think he'd really defy them?" asked the other man, nervous. "The law is the law, and no one breaks it without consequences." Thomas felt a chill run through him. The authorities were watching, and now whispers were circulating in the town. He realized that time was running out. The longer he delayed, the more likely someone would discover the truth. He needed a careful plan, but it also needed courage. Standing against the law could destroy his career, his reputation, even his freedom. Yet the thought of turning the young woman over to the cruel authorities made his stomach twist with guilt. That evening, as the sky turned orange and purple, Thomas returned to the small camp. The Apache woman was sitting quietly by the stream, her face reflecting the fading sunlight. She noticed the worry in his eyes and spoke softly. "You seem troubled," she said. "What is happening?" Thomas sighed. "The authorities expect me to hand you over soon," he admitted. "Patrols are moving closer and people are starting to whisper. I must find a way to protect you without drawing attention. It is not easy. Every choice is dangerous." The woman listened, her eyes steady and calm. "I trust you," she said simply. "I can see that you are trying to help, but be careful. They are powerful and they will not accept disobedience easily." Thomas nodded. Her words reminded him of the weight of responsibility he carried. Protecting her was not only a matter of morality but also a matter of survival. One wrong step could put them both in grave danger, yet he felt a growing determination. He had made a promise and he would not break it. Not now, not ever. Over the next few days, Thomas faced mounting pressure from all sides. The authorities sent letters demanding updates on the order, asking why the Apache woman had not been delivered. Townspeople began to ask questions, some suspicious, some curious. Even his deputies, loyal and brave, were worried. They trusted him, but they also feared the consequences of disobeying the law. One afternoon, Deputy Lane approached Thomas, concern written clearly on his young face. "Sheriff, they are asking for answers," he said. "They want to know where the girl is. They will not wait forever." Thomas placed a hand on Lane's shoulder, steadying both himself and the young deputy. "I know," he said quietly, "but we cannot hand her over, not while I am sheriff, not while I have the chance to protect her." Lane swallowed hard, his eyes full of respect and worry. "I will follow your lead," he said, "but be careful. The authorities do not forgive defiance." Thomas nodded. He had always known the path of righteousness was difficult, often lonely, and sometimes dangerous. But the thought of the Apache woman's life being stolen from her filled him with a resolve that fear could not break. He knew that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That night, Thomas sat by the small fire they had built near the stream, thinking about the days to come. The Apache woman was nearby, quietly tending to the fire. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "You worry too much," she said softly, almost teasing. "You carry the weight of the world on your shoulders." Thomas smiled faintly, though the tension remained. "Perhaps," he admitted, "but this is not just my weight. This is the weight of justice, of what is right. I cannot ignore it. I cannot betray you." She nodded, understanding the depth of his words. "Then we must be careful," she said, "and we must trust each other. You have risked much for me already, but the days ahead will be even harder." Thomas felt a mixture of pride and concern. He admired her courage and wisdom, even in the face of danger. Her presence reminded him why he had chosen to stand against the law's cruelty. Protecting her was not just an act of rebellion, it was an act of humanity. In the following days, Thomas began to take more calculated actions. He observed the patrols, memorized their schedules, and mapped out secret paths through the wilderness. He considered various options to hide the Apache woman safely, perhaps moving her closer to a friendly settlement or even sending her to her tribe if he could arrange it. Each plan required careful thought and precise timing. One mistake could end everything. Meanwhile, the Apache woman helped in small ways, learning the land, scouting for dangers, and preparing for the possibility of travel. She grew more confident in Thomas's guidance, yet she remained cautious. Trust was still fragile, built on mutual respect and careful observation. Together, they formed a quiet partnership, united by the shared goal of survival and justice. Tension in the town continued to grow. Rumors spread about the sheriff's unusual behavior, and some townspeople began to watch him closely. They noticed his frequent trips to the outskirts, his secretive conversations, and the way he avoided certain areas of the town. Some admired his integrity silently, while others feared his defiance might bring trouble to them all. One evening, Thomas gathered a few trusted townspeople in secret. He explained the situation carefully, emphasizing the danger and the importance of protecting the young Apache woman. Some hesitated, worried about the law and the authorities' reaction. Others agreed quietly, inspired by Thomas's courage and moral clarity. In that small gathering, a plan began to take shape, a network of support that could help protect the girl if the situation became desperate. Despite the careful planning, Thomas knew that time was running out. The authorities were growing impatient, their demands more frequent. Patrols were moving closer, and every decision carried greater risk. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, yet he also felt a growing strength within himself. Courage, he realized, was not only about facing danger, it was about standing for what was right, even when the world demanded obedience. Late one night, as he sat by the fire with the Apache woman, Thomas spoke quietly. "We are approaching a critical moment," he said. "Soon we must act. We cannot wait any longer, but I promise you I will not let them take you. We will find a way to keep you safe." The woman looked at him, her eyes reflecting both fear and hope. "I trust you, Thomas," she said softly, "but we must be careful. They are watching. They will not forgive defiance." Thomas nodded, feeling both the burden and the strength of his decision. He knew that the coming days would test both of them in ways they could not yet imagine. But he also knew that the bond they had formed, the trust and courage they shared, would guide them through the challenges ahead. And so, as the night deepened and the stars shone overhead, Thomas prepared for the trials to come. The sheriff faced a moral dilemma of immense weight: obey the law and betray his conscience, or defy the authorities and risk everything. He had already chosen his path, and there was no turning back. The days ahead would demand courage, wisdom, and careful planning. But Thomas Mitchell knew in his heart that he would protect the Apache woman, no matter the cost. The fire crackled quietly, a small light in the darkness, symbolizing hope and resistance. And in that moment, the sheriff and the young Apache woman prepared to face the challenges ahead, united by trust, courage, and the shared belief that justice and humanity must prevail. The days grew tense as Sheriff Thomas Mitchell realized the time for careful planning had passed. The authorities were becoming impatient, sending more letters demanding the delivery of the Apache woman. Rumors in the town were spreading faster than he had anticipated. Every movement he made was observed, every decision weighed with danger. Yet Thomas felt an unshakable determination. He had made a promise, and breaking it was unthinkable. The girl's life was more important than any law, any career, or any consequence he could face. He rose early one morning, the air crisp and quiet. The first light of dawn stretched across the hills, casting long shadows that made the landscape seem mysterious and full of secrets. Thomas mounted his horse and rode toward the small hideout where the Apache woman had been staying. She was waiting, sitting quietly by the stream, her dark eyes alert and watchful. She noticed the determination in Thomas's face and, without a word, understood that today would be the day for action. Thomas dismounted and approached her slowly. "We must move soon," he said quietly. "The patrols will notice if we stay much longer. I have a plan, but it will require courage and patience. You must follow my instructions carefully." She nodded. "I will," she replied, her voice calm yet strong. "I trust you." The sheriff felt a surge of reassurance. Trust had been earned, and now it would be tested in action. He handed her a small satchel with essentials, food, water, and a blanket, and motioned for her to follow him through the narrow path that led away from the stream. Every step was measured, every sound considered. The land was rough and uneven, but Thomas knew it well. He led her through hidden trails, avoiding the main roads where patrols might pass. As they moved, Thomas kept his senses alert. He scanned the horizon for signs of guards or townspeople who might recognize them. The Apache woman moved quietly, learning from him, matching his careful steps and trusting his judgment. The bond they had built over the past days became their shield. It was not just trust, it was mutual understanding and shared courage. Hours passed as they traveled through the hills and valleys. The landscape changed from dry, dusty plains to areas with taller grass and thick shrubs that provided natural cover. The sheriff spoke little, knowing that silence was safer, but he occasionally reassured the woman. "We are making progress," he said softly. "We are safe for now, but we must stay vigilant." Eventually, they reached a secluded area near an old, abandoned cabin. Thomas knew this place would offer temporary shelter. The cabin was hidden by trees and shrubs, far from any paths the authorities might use. He led the woman inside and secured the doors, ensuring they had a place to rest and plan their next steps. As they settled, the Apache woman finally spoke. "You have risked much for me, Thomas," she said. "Why? Most people would obey the law without question. Why choose differently?" Thomas looked at her, his eyes steady. "Because it is the right thing to do," he replied. "The law is not always just, and following it blindly can lead to great harm. I cannot allow you to be treated as property. You are a human being and your life matters. That is reason enough." She studied him, a mix of admiration and concern in her eyes. "You are brave," she said softly, "but courage alone may not be enough. They will come for us if they discover where we are. We must act wisely." Thomas nodded. He knew she was right. Courage was important, but planning and strategy were just as vital. Over the next few hours, he worked with her to gather supplies, prepare food, and plan a route that would take them far from the town and any authorities searching for them. They discussed every possibility, every risk, and every way to stay hidden. Late in the evening, Thomas looked at the Apache woman with resolve. "Tomorrow, we begin the journey," he said. "It will not be easy, but we must move quickly. The authorities are closing in, and the more we delay, the greater the danger." She nodded silently, her expression determined. "I am ready," she said. "I will follow your lead." The next morning, they set out before sunrise. The cool, misty air cloaked their movements, helping them avoid detection. Thomas led the way, carefully choosing the path through hills and woods that would minimize the chance of being spotted. The Apache woman followed closely, learning to move quietly, her senses alert to every sound and shadow. As they traveled, they encountered natural obstacles, fallen trees, steep slopes, and rushing streams. Each challenge tested their endurance and patience. Thomas encouraged her, reminding her to stay calm and focused. "Every step we take brings us closer to safety," he said. "Keep moving and do not lose hope." By midday, they paused in a small clearing, hidden from view by tall grass. Thomas allowed the Apache woman to rest while he scanned the area for any signs of danger. He noticed the distant sound of a patrol, a group of men on horseback moving along the main trail. His heart pounded, but he remained calm, signaling to her to stay low. They waited patiently, letting the patrol pass without noticing them. It was a small victory, but it strengthened their confidence. As evening approached, they continued their journey, moving steadily toward a distant settlement where Thomas knew they could find temporary refuge. He had friends there, people who shared his sense of justice and would help protect the Apache woman. Every step was a careful balance of speed and caution, ensuring they remained hidden while making progress toward safety. During one brief rest, the Apache woman spoke, her voice filled with quiet wonder. "I never imagined someone would risk so much for me," she said. "In my life, I have only known fear and loss, but now I feel hope." Thomas smiled faintly, a mix of exhaustion and relief in his expression. "Hope is powerful," he said. "It gives us strength when we need it most, and we will need all our strength in the days ahead." Night fell, and the two of them moved cautiously under the cover of darkness. The stars provided a faint light, guiding them through the rugged terrain. Thomas knew that the journey would be long and difficult, but he also knew that they were moving in the right direction. Every mile they covered, every hidden trail they followed, brought them closer to freedom. After several days of careful travel, they reached the outskirts of the friendly settlement. Thomas approached a trusted ally, a kind-hearted merchant who had always respected the sheriff's sense of justice. The man agreed to help, providing shelter and supplies for the Apache woman. For the first time in weeks, Thomas felt a measure of relief. She was safe for now, and they could plan the next steps without the immediate threat of capture. As they settled in the safe house, the Apache woman turned to Thomas. "You saved me," she said softly. "You risked everything. I cannot thank you enough." Thomas shook his head. "No thanks are needed," he replied. "The right thing is not always the easy thing. I could not stand by and do nothing. Your life is worth far more than any law or order." She looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude and respect. "I will never forget your courage," she said. "You have shown me that there are people in this world who care about justice and humanity. That gives me strength." Thomas felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The danger was not entirely behind them, but they had taken a crucial step toward safety. Together, they had defied injustice, faced tremendous risk, and emerged with hope intact. The journey had tested their courage, patience, and trust, but it had also forged a bond that would remain strong no matter what challenges lay ahead. As night fell over the settlement, Thomas and the Apache woman sat quietly, reflecting on the journey so far. The fire crackled softly, a symbol of warmth and protection. For the first time, Thomas allowed himself to believe that they could succeed, that they could overcome the forces that sought to harm her. He knew that the path ahead would still be difficult, but he also knew that courage, careful planning, and unwavering trust could carry them through. In that quiet moment, Thomas made a silent vow to continue protecting her, to face any danger, and to uphold the principles of justice and humanity. And the Apache woman, feeling the strength and sincerity of his promise, found hope and courage growing within her heart. Together, they were ready to face whatever challenges awaited them, united by trust, determination, and the unbreakable belief that freedom and justice were worth fighting for. The journey had been long and dangerous, but Sheriff Thomas Mitchell and the Apache woman finally arrived at a place where they could breathe without fear. The friendly settlement, tucked away in a hidden valley, offered a quiet sanctuary. Here, the authorities would find it nearly impossible to track them. For the first time in weeks, the Apache woman could rest without constantly scanning the horizon for danger. Thomas led her through the small village, careful to avoid drawing attention. His trusted ally, the merchant who had offered them shelter, greeted them warmly. "You've come far," the man said, "and you've been brave. Rest here. You are safe." The Apache woman looked around, taking in the peaceful surroundings. The village was quiet, simple, and welcoming. Children played near the stream and families moved about without fear. For her, it was a glimpse of a life she had almost lost, a life filled with freedom, safety, and hope. She turned to Thomas, her eyes reflecting gratitude, relief, and something deeper, admiration for the man who had risked everything for her. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You saved me." Thomas shook his head, a small smile on his face. "No one can take credit for what is right," he said. "We all have choices to make. I simply chose the path that I could live with. Your life deserved protection." That was reason enough. For a long while, they sat quietly by the edge of the village, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Thomas thought of the danger they had faced, the careful planning, and the courage required to defy the law. The Apache woman thought of the fear she had endured, the uncertainty of every day, and the strength it had taken to trust someone again. Both understood that the past weeks had changed them profoundly. Over the following days, Thomas worked quietly with the village people to arrange a safe future for the Apache woman. They found a secure place for her to live temporarily, with kind families who respected her privacy and freedom. She began to regain her strength, learning to trust the world again and slowly allowing herself to hope for the life she deserved. Thomas watched her carefully, ensuring that she had everything she needed. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from pride, but from the knowledge that he had acted rightly when it mattered most. Saving her had come at great personal risk, but it had also brought a reward far greater than anything he could have imagined. The knowledge that one person's courage could protect another's life and dignity. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with brilliant shades of orange and pink, Thomas and the Apache woman walked to a quiet hill overlooking the settlement. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Thomas," she said quietly, "I cannot imagine what would have happened if you had not acted. I would have been lost, taken from everything I knew. You gave me a chance to live freely, to survive. I will never forget it." Thomas looked at her, his expression solemn but calm. "It was the right thing to do," he said simply. "Sometimes doing what is right is the only choice that matters. The law may demand one thing, but humanity demands another. I could not ignore that." She nodded, a small smile breaking across her face. "You have shown me that courage and kindness still exist in the world," she said. "Even in the darkest times, hope can be found, and you reminded me of that hope." The sheriff felt a quiet warmth in his heart. The journey had been perilous, but it had also been a reminder of what it meant to act with integrity. Justice, compassion, and courage were not just words, they were actions, choices made when they mattered most. He had acted, and in doing so, he had preserved the life and dignity of another human being. In the following weeks, Thomas received news from the town. His defiance of the authorities had caused a stir. Some were angry, some were supportive, and some were simply curious about the choices he had made. There were consequences, as he had expected. The authorities questioned him, demanded explanations, and even threatened legal action. But Thomas faced it all with calm resolve, knowing that the life he had saved was worth far more than any threat or punishment. The Apache woman continued to regain her confidence. She explored the surrounding hills, learned more about the village and its people, and began to rebuild a sense of normalcy. Her trust in Thomas never wavered, and she often spoke of the courage it took to stand against injustice. She understood that the sheriff's actions had not only saved her life, but had also restored her belief in the goodness of people. One morning, as Thomas watched the woman walk along a quiet path near the village, he reflected on the journey they had shared. It had been filled with danger, uncertainty, and moral challenge. He had faced threats, whispers, and pressure from the authorities, yet he had acted according to his conscience. Every decision had been difficult, but every choice had been guided by a simple truth. Protecting life and doing what is right is more important than obedience to unjust orders. The Apache woman returned to him, carrying a small bundle of wildflowers she had picked from the hills. "For you," she said, holding them out, "a small gift to thank you for your courage and kindness." Thomas accepted them with a gentle smile. "Thank you," he said. "But the real gift was seeing you safe, seeing you free. That is enough for me." Days turned into weeks, and the Apache woman became part of the village community. She shared stories of her people, her traditions, and her experiences, enriching the lives of those around her. She learned new skills, adapted to her new surroundings, and began to dream of a future where she could live with dignity and freedom. Thomas continued to watch over her quietly, ensuring that she remained safe and that the village understood the importance of protecting her. In time, the sheriff reflected on the journey not only as a series of events, but as a lesson in courage, morality, and humanity. The choice to defy the authorities had been difficult, but it had been the only choice that mattered. The life of the Apache woman, her dignity, and her freedom were priceless. And in saving her, he had affirmed the principle that justice is not always found in the law, it is found in the courage to do what is right. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the sky turned to shades of deep purple, Thomas and the Apache woman sat together quietly. The firelight flickered across their faces, casting shadows that danced with the promise of hope and safety. The journey had been long, but it had been worth every step. Together, they had faced fear, danger, and moral challenge, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and filled with hope for the future. The Apache woman looked at Thomas, her expression full of gratitude. "You have given me more than safety," she said. "You have given me a life I thought I would never have, and for that I will be forever grateful." Thomas placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It was not a choice of bravery," he said softly. "It was a choice of conscience. Every person deserves dignity, every life matters. I simply followed what I knew to be right." The Apache woman smiled faintly, the first real smile since their journey began. "Then let us move forward with hope," she said. "Together we will face whatever comes, knowing that courage and kindness exist in the world." As night fell, the settlement was calm and quiet, filled with the soft sounds of life and freedom. Thomas and the Apache woman looked toward the horizon, knowing that the past weeks had changed them both forever. They had faced danger, injustice, and uncertainty, yet they had prevailed through courage, trust, and unwavering moral conviction. And in that moment, Sheriff Thomas Mitchell knew that he had done more than protect a single life. He had demonstrated the power of human conscience, the importance of standing against injustice, and the truth that even in a harsh world, hope and courage could guide the way. The Apache woman, safe and free, embodied the resilience of the human spirit and the reward that comes from standing for what is right. Together, they had forged a story of survival, trust, and humanity, an enduring reminder that courage, integrity, and compassion can triumph over fear and cruelty. And as the stars shone brightly above the peaceful settlement, both of them understood that the journey, though difficult, had led to a future filled with freedom, dignity, and hope.